Good morning, everyone. Oh, now I'm nervous. I wasn't nervous before. Okay, that's no lie. I was nervous. I've been nervous. I've been nervous for weeks, but I am really excited to be here. I'm really grateful to be here. And as JG said, I am Val. Technically, my government name, Valerie Virginia Rose Gay. And now you know why I go by Val Gay. I'm a multimodal artist, a serial entrepreneur, and I work in the civic creative space here in Philadelphia. And I was talking to someone earlier, shout out Sam, and we were chatting, and I was like, oh, right, I should probably say something about the actual office, just in case some of you don't know the kind of work that we do in City Hall. First of all, how many of you know or knew that City Hall or that the city has an Office of Arts and Culture? Okay, almost everybody. Okay, great, yay. We used to be called Office of Arts, Culture, and Creative Economy, OACCE, but as I love to say, you are welcome. We changed our name to Creative Philadelphia. And in our work, we steward the city's public art collection, which is over 1,000 works of monuments, memorials, statues, paintings, murals, etc. We also have the great fortune of being in relationship with Mural Arts. So Mural Arts, for the first time in its 41-year history, sits inside of our portfolio, which is really great. We also have an exhibition program. So all of you who raised your hand saying that you knew about the Office of Arts and Culture, have you been over to see our gallery and the exhibitions that we have? Yay, I see a lot of nodding. Yay, awesome. Those of you who haven't, just 2 blocks away, we, thanks to a great grant from the William Penn Foundation, have 15 new exhibition cases in the Northeast quadrant. So we already had several. 5 of them were really old, like 40 years old, and were dangerous. But our curator of exhibitions and programs, Tu Huynh, is so dedicated that he actually would seriously risk his life to go and hang work. So we were finally able to get rid of those. We have 10 new, in addition to our other functioning exhibition cases. I've been saying that my goal is to bedazzle all of City Hall. And so we have all of these cases, which is great. We don't do individual or solo shows, but we do a lot of, actually all of our shows are group shows. Sometimes they're thematic, sometimes they're in relationship with a particular organization. So I invite you, if you are interested in showing your work in City Hall, to contact us. It's really simple, phila.gov/arts, and that'll take you there. We also have special public art projects like Healing Verse Germantown, which is a poetry-led project to address and heal the wounds of gun violence, specifically in Germantown. We're very fortunate that we get to work with 2 former poet laureates, Trapita B. Mason and Yolanda Wisher, with the public art curator, Rob Blackson. And so this project started in 2024, will go through 2026, will culminate in a temporary public art project based on the work of workshops with people impacted by gun violence, which is just about all of us. Whether you know someone or not, every time you hear about gun violence, it impacts us in some way. And so while we wait for the public art exhibition that's coming, we have for you a weekly poetry line, a call that you can call. So 1-800-POEM-RX2, which is 763-6792. You call that number and you'll hear a poem written by someone from Philadelphia who've been through our workshops. Very healing. And we're also leading the city's first ever cultural master plan, but more about that later. So when I was invited to speak on innovation, first I was like, oh my gosh, why did I say yes? I spent some time sitting with that word because in my experience, innovation can mean very different things depending on where you're standing. And so what I'd like to offer to you this morning isn't a definition or a prescription, if you will, but just a few reflections shaped by my creative practice and my work within communities. I've come to believe that innovation doesn't always mean inventing something new. Often, it looks more like seeing what's already there, just differently. Now, before we go any further, I want to invite you to think about something, and you don't need to share it. So it's not one of those, I'm a preacher's kid, and so I grew up in church where they're like, turn to your neighbor. We're not doing that today. No worries. But I do want you to think about something. Maybe it's a creative idea that you've been circling. Maybe it's a system that feels frustrating or misaligned, or just a question that you don't have language for yet. Just hold that in your mind. In my experience, that's often where innovation begins. One of my longest running creative practices is a podcast project called King Crush Thursday. Over time, I've interviewed Black men, artists, entrepreneurs, business leaders, fathers, men who have been incarcerated, and many more. And I ask each of them the same 6 questions. What surprised me wasn't any single answer. It was what emerged over time. I didn't change the questions. I didn't rush the process. I don't rush the process. What surfaced came from sustained listening. In fact, what I say to them, I feel that we are censored enough. And so it's very low production value. Andrew, close your ears. I don't do a lot of editing. In fact, the only editing I do is if the man says, you know what, let me say that again. Because who am I to say, he didn't mean that. So I'm gonna take a little bit of this, and I'm gonna take a little bit of that, and it becomes something else. It's like, no, what you say is what you say, and I'm here to listen. And what came from that and what surfaced from this sustained listening, through that work, I began to understand that listening, especially when it's consistent, is a creative act, and perhaps even an innovative one. Now, before I listen to the king, I say, let's see this words, please. No. Okay, how can I do this? Hold on. It was really cool. So imagine the video's going. It's the opening credits of the thing. It's like really cool. It's a compilation of all the guys. They're moving, they're saying hello. Because let me tell you a little bit about it. It started where I would walk up to men, wherever I was in the world, Black men, and if they seemed like they were cool or they're doing something really interesting, I would say, hi, my name is Val. I have this social media things before it was a podcast. And I'm just highlighting uplifting Black men. Can I take your photo? And if you have social media, I'll tag you. And usually, I think I photographed maybe 150, 200 men just walking around. And all but 4 said yes. Usually it was like this. Really? Okay. It's like, what are you gonna do with that? So I was like, okay, never mind. Act natural. I'll do video. And so these videos here are just guys. Like one of my favorite videos is of 2 guys. Do you guys remember, one day at a time, one step at a time, the newspaper, the guys, the people who would stand on the corner and it was up. These 2 guys were my favorite. If you ever see our series, you'll see them and they're like hugging each other. They're showing their badges, they're showing their hats because they were so proud. And they were like, yes, this is community. I want you to see community. 2 Black men smiling and having a good time. So I created this series. Initially, it was thematic. So if I saw them, so in the case of these folks who were formerly unhoused, I would say, hey, Black man, I see you. I'm sure the world is difficult for you right now. You may be struggling to get back on your feet, and folks may have counted you out. And then I say the same thing at the end. But hang in there, Black men, because we need you. I see you, I'm praying for you, and I love you. And then that was King First Thursday. Then the pandemic hit, and I wasn't walking up to anyone, anywhere, asking them anything. And the young woman who I work with, Zamira Scott, who is helping me put these things on Instagram, said, I think you need to turn this into a podcast. Now, she said this before the pandemic, and I was like, absolutely not. I don't have time for this, I'm not doing it. And she's a nudge, and so she kept saying it. And finally, when the pandemic hit, I knew I didn't want to let go of the series because what the men and the people who are watching the series told me it meant to them. And the reality is, I don't have a large audience. It's not for a large audience. If it ever becomes viral, great. But that's not the point. The point is for each eyeball that sees it, that is meaningful to them. And so we finally started, and we did it through Zoom. And so the opening credits, I always say the same thing. After about the third time, I realized I had created inadvertently a script for myself. Hi, and welcome to another edition of King Crush Thursday, the series where we highlight and uplift Black men because frankly, not too many people are doing it. My name is Val Gay, and I am super excited about this brother today. Let's see, and then insert who he is. I never ask or never say what they do for a living because I honestly don't care. Except that it's legal and it's not hurting anyone. It's just because it's legal. I mean, you know. And so other than that, I don't care. Other than that, I don't care. And so we've had all these great things. And so I ask them the same 6 questions. What does manhood mean to you? Who and or what is important to you? How do you want us to see you? What is your epic dream? Who are you? And what did I miss? And I've learned so much from these men. My life has been enriched. I learned more about my father and my brother through this process. Oftentimes we don't ask people questions. And we don't always stop and listen. In my civic work, innovation shows up less as invention and more as translation. Translating community language into policy language, translating artistic vision into systems that weren't originally designed for it. In my experience, innovation happens when people understand one another well enough to move forward, even if they don't fully agree. I mentioned earlier leading the cultural planning process. So the reality is we are not the first to attempt this. And as with many great ideas, iteration happens in pockets, sometimes over years, if not decades. And then finally, the idea comes to life. And such is the process with our cultural master plan. So Philadelphia is 342 years old. And as Benjamin Franklin said, those who fail to plan to fail. And one could argue that the state of arts and culture as a sector in Philadelphia sits in that space where there's really not been systemic, overarching planning for all of us. Now, how is that possible when Philadelphia is such a vibrant and an amazing city? How many of you moved here because of the arts and culture scene in Philadelphia? Several of you, yes, several of you. And yet somehow or another, we still are in this disarray. To me, it's very similar to how Philadelphia is the first World Heritage Site, and now we're number 2, but also simultaneously the poorest, largest big city. We have lots of seemingly intractable problems, and within those problems lie opportunities for change, opportunities for innovation, and we are seizing that. So we have partners. We're taking a large net approach, if you will. We have partners, the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance and the Pennsylvania Humanities, as well as the Histories Collaborative, Philadelphia Histories Collaborative. We're so excited because each of them are focusing on particular groups. The city, my office, we decided to go to the city. and ask them questions and to bring them along. And I have to say that initially I did a very unscientific survey. I talked to people all over the city, and I asked them the question generally, what is arts and culture? And what I got back was something analogous to those people floating on clouds eating peeled grapes while someone strokes a harp. So then I asked the next question, is it relevant to you? And the answer was obviously absolutely not. But then when I just ever so gently scratched the surface, I could see that we are inextricably linked to their lived experience. And so I went back to, and I would say, no, that's not arts and culture. No, like the things that you're doing, that's arts and culture. So I went back to our colleagues and I said, I think we have a definition problem. And then I ran into a cloud floating, peeled grape eating while someone strokes a harp person. And when I said the same thing, they were like, yes, they get it. That's exactly what we are. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. It's yes and. And so then I started saying, if your idea of visual arts is what you see on the walls of the Philadelphia Art Museum or the Barnes Foundation or the L'Orangerie in Paris, great. We're gonna meet you where you are. If your idea of visual arts is what you see folks in your neighborhood legally writing, doing on the walls, also called mural arts, great. We're gonna meet you where you are. And hopefully we'll be able to bring the communities together and share what is meaningful to you. So we did 14 arts and culture town halls, including a specific one for youth, because tomorrow they'll be running this city and the world. They were data gathering, asset mapping, community building, and awareness campaign sessions. Because we're so far behind that I don't have the luxury of having a single purpose anything. Everything has to have serve multiple purposes and have fidelity in those purposes. So that part was all about that. Then innovation came. And it was a bit of a slog to get folks to understand why this was important, what I'm about to say. I wanted to show the city how creative we are across the board, and that arts and culture, creativity is an innate human attribute. So we asked folks across the city to submit it was open to anyone. You didn't have to identify as a creative to submit your ideas. Focused on cleaner, greener, safer, with access to opportunity for all. Why? Because that's all we hear coming from our government. And so if we in the city identifies those as our intractable problems, I want to psychologically and not so unconsciously put a flag in the ground saying arts and culture has solutions to these seemingly intractable problems. And even more so, the creative residents have solutions. So despite the fact that there were some people like, don't do it, they'll steal your things, they'll steal your ideas, don't do it, blah, blah, blah. They talked about my salary. Yes, I read it on Reddit. I saw you. And here's the thing. What I've learned, take everything with a grain of salt, right? It's a lesson in when you read something, especially when you see about yourself, you're like, that's not even true. Whatever. So it made me think about all the things I jump into, particularly on social media. Sometimes I want to take a beat. But anyway, I did read it. I'm looking at the camera. I saw you. And I still love you. Because that's all of our right, which is great. And fortunately, nearly 100 people applied. We selected one idea from each district. The goal was to select 2 youth projects. Why I needed 2 is because then we were going to pair folks across the city. How many of you are native Philadelphians? Awesome. My people, you know, we don't leave our neighborhoods. Because why would we ever? Like, why, right? It was like, right? No reason to. And so the likelihood that someone who's living in District 9 or District 10 in the far, far northeast has ever been, say, for going to the airport down to District 2 in the far southwest to be in community is slim to none, and vice versa. And they couldn't be further apart geographically, but ideologically, they're in alignment. And so we wanted to bring them together, to bring the city together. As creatives, we know how arts and culture allow us to move throughout the city, but most of our, particularly Native Philadelphians, don't have that. So we did that, and then we paired youth. Turns out we did not get anyone from the far, far Northeast. So we ended up with 3 youth groups who were phenomenal, and so we paired them. And then we wrapped around them a 10-week incubator where these folks, oh, and by the way, the ideas didn't have to be fully fleshed out. It was just good ideas around these particular things. We helped them develop their ideas. We had them talk with lawyers about intellectual property and protecting their intellectual property. We had a session around financial literacy. We had sessions around storytelling and how do you pitch? How do you put it all together? How do you price these things? And then we had 2 Shark Tanks, which was awesome. The first one was for the community, a room similar to this, and they got up and we were all blown away by their talks, including the youngest 2 participants was a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old. Amazing. Then the last day, they pitched a real Shark Tank. They pitched in front of funders. It was phenomenal. I'm hoping that we'll be able to do more of that and scale it. Now, how does that relate to the cultural plan? That's what the big question was folks were asking. I actually had someone saying, I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. It's like, okay, I heard it you the first time. And what it is it allows us not only to collect more data about what's happening in our communities, but during this whole process, when we are doing things like literature reviews and data analytics, and we're very quiet, the city gets to see continually that we didn't go away. We are trying to work against what has always happened in the past, where people swoop in, they come into neighborhoods, they cherry pick ideas from neighborhoods, and then they go off having stellar careers, getting grants, and the community is left bereft. Because now you know that you actually had good ideas, and they were worth funding, but not necessarily for you to be funded. And so these ideas, these innovative ideas, all of these bold ideas these folks had, were for the community, from the community, and they're going right back into the city, and all of us get to be better as a result of it. So I'm also a composer and a performer, and I spend a lot of time working inside constraints. Key signatures, instrumentation, commissions with parameters. I've found that constraints don't necessarily limit creativity. Often they give it shape. Some of the most innovative work I've made came not from unlimited freedom, but from deep attention inside of a structure. So I have a group called the Ever Ensemble. We like to say, just as the word ever transcends time, the Ever Ensemble transcends musical genre. And so I would often say, we do everything from like Bach to Beyonce, sometimes in the same song. It's really cool. And it's a lot of fun, and it's very different. So my music degrees are in opera. Yay. And I grew up playing gospel music. I play gospel music every Sunday at my church. I sing in multiple things. And to me, music is music is music. And I wanted to bring all of this stuff together and find audiences. And so if you only like Bach, hopefully you'll like what we've done with Fidelity, but then maybe you'll be introduced to this other composer that you never heard of, or this other genre that you never heard of. Or if sometimes I've given concerts in my church, and I'll start with a gospel song and have the choir, the audience like, yeah, yeah, and then they'll hear, hallelujah, and they're like, Miss Val, I like that classical stuff. It's great, and I love it, because sometimes also, particularly for the Philadelphians, native Philadelphians, we also don't often get the opportunity, even though it's open to us. We have invisible walls around us We don't get the opportunity to experience things that could actually have great meaning to our lives. And so as folks like me, translators, composers, all of us have the opportunity to open the doors to our community and move beyond these structures into these beautiful places of possibility. So across these different practices, a few things keep returning for me. Listening can be innovative. Doggone it, none of my stuff is on. Okay, so imagine, this was great. I was so proud of this. I even timed it and planned it. Okay, imagine this was gray, and then I press the next button and it slowly comes to life. So like squint your eyes and then open them so you can see it come to life. But the three things, listening can be innovative. Translation can be a form of leadership. Iteration often requires faith. When practicing music, for example, it can sometimes require an act of faith to tackle an especially difficult passage or work. One has to have the faith that the iteration will lead to mastery and the desired performance goal, and then still be flexible enough to shift when your technology is not working or anything else. So let's return to the one thing that you were holding earlier. Do you remember it? I'd like to offer a small experiment. What happens if you ask it one different question? Who else might need to be involved? What might I be assuming? What if I started smaller? In my experience, innovation often lives in that pause. I don't think innovation is a personality trait. I've come to see it as a practice, something we choose in how we listen, how we collaborate, and how open we remain to learning. So as I've been thinking about innovation these past few weeks, I've realized something simple. Innovation is really just another way of saying beginning. Not beginning perfectly, not beginning publicly, not beginning with a plan that guarantees anything, just beginning. Beginning to see differently, beginning to listen differently, beginning to ask a different question. And I've learned that beginnings don't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. Sometimes innovation is just the willingness to take one small step towards something you've been circling for a while. And in my experience, innovation isn't the finished thing. It's the moment you give yourself permission to start. And for me, innovation has been less about doing more and more about seeing differently. And I hope if anything shifted for you this morning, you'll carry it back with you. That's how innovation seems to travel, quietly and from person to person. Thanks.
Buenos días,